Hello, we're John and Elizabeth.
Hello.
We're on board Corrick. We're in Carnarvon.
It's taken us a bit of a
It's taken
while.
a while. Well, so we left the bottom of Scotland, been through Ireland, and we're now at the top of Wales, including a transit of the Menai Strait. It has been a mix of champagne and vinegar sailing, it's fair to say. Hope you enjoy this video. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Well, today's plan didn't exactly go to plan. We'd intended to get up nice and early from in gear and make for Port Rush. Port Rush being or described as a accessible, very accessible anchorage, and I'm not massively familiar with this part of the coast. So we got up nice and early, set off. I was expecting it to be hard work. The wind forecast was for west and going into the northwest, and the heading was about 230, so I thought we might just make it. But the tides weren't really helpful to us at all. The tide started setting against us from about 10, and by about that time I realised there was very little chance of us making it, so we started to shape a course for Ballycastle, with a view of heading round the east side of Rathlin Island because of the McDonald's race to the west. But in the end, the tide thwarted that, and we ended up sort of slap bang in the middle to the north of Rathlin, punching a horrible amount of tide. So we turned round and we've come round, and McDonald, it's close to slack water, and the race looks absolutely fine, but it is still definitely there, even though it is, as I say, slack water and reasonably benign conditions. But we've got a berth in Ballycastle, so looking forward to that. We're in Port Rush.
But the boat isn't.
No, it's in Ballycastle. If we'd left gear today, this morning, then the wind direction would have been, I think, just perfect for getting here. But we didn't, and yesterday it was a bit further into the south than either predicted or hoped for. So a little bit of optimiser and bias going on there.
Can I just point out something? Lifeboat. There's a very famous picture with the lifeboat launching into gale force winds with up to 113 miles per hour.
Yeah.
It's the most spectacular picture. It just brings a tingle to your spine.
We might Google it and insert it in the video.
Yeah,
If we can find it.
if we can find it.
One thing I'll say for this part of the Antrim coast is it's very well served with public transport. We were able to get a bus to Port Rush, and the same bus ticket then brought us back through Bushmills and then to the Giant's Causeway and the lovely visitor centre there with this model in it, and we were able to spend a very happy afternoon wandering in glorious sunshine in this countryside, taking it all in. It really was very pleasant indeed. And we got back to Ballycastle for sunset and overlooking Fairhead. Very pleasant day and all round. We are in Glen Arm again, almost exactly 3 months since we were here on the way up.
Yeah.
We pulled in here yesterday because we had tried to get from Ballycastle to Carrickfergus in one hop against a southeasterly breeze, and it was just a bit too much, and by 3 or 4 o'clock the wind was beginning to drop, the tide was beginning to ease off and would turn in a pair of hours. And I just thought, do we pull into Glen Arm or do we motor to Carrickfergus? So we pulled into Glen Arm, had an impromptu barbecue, which was really nice last night, with a couple on the boat next door.
It was really good because we did have the sails that we weren't using the engine at all.
Yeah, the whole pile of people motored past. But we now have a little bit more breeze, but a shorter distance. So I think we're looking for a fairly fruity little sail. But we've just waited for the tide to start to head south east.
So we're about to go.
I'd say that was midday, wouldn't you?
I would. See you in Carrickfergus.
See you in Carrickfergus. The sail the previous day, we'd had the number 2 Genoa and most of the main for most of the day, and that was fine. We went really well, but we were predicting another 5 to 10 knots of breeze, so we changed down when we were in Glen Arm to put the heavy weather jib on, and at different times we either had 1 or 2 reefs in the main coming down here. It was very light when we left, and I thought we had been overly conservative and it was going to slow us down, but as we got clear of the headland and as the tidal stream picked up and the wind picked up, it all got a little bit more bouncy. But sometimes we were 2 reefs, sometimes we were 1 reef in the main. The boat went really well, but it was a wind against tide situation in the North Channel, which has a fair reputation. We had a knot and a bit of tide helping us at one point, but we had anything up to 25 knots of breeze from the southeast, and that was causing quite a short chop, which, because they weren't exactly opposite each other, meant we went differently on different tacks. So sometimes, like just now, we'd have 1 reef in the main heading in towards the land, but then we'd put a tack in and need to put another reef in, just because the way the sea was, we just were being blown right over, just getting a little bit wet. But actually, we hoped that we would be able to bear away in towards Carrickfergus. Turned out not to be the case. The wind went round and was coming out of the loch itself. But it was a long old day. But we arrived pretty warm and pretty dry, having sailed a fairly conservative day sail. But I think probably better to arrive warm and dry than cold and wet and 5 minutes earlier. But arrived into Carrickfergus, who were hugely welcoming. Well, it was blowing old boots the next day, so we took the train into Belfast and visited the market, as well as some of the tourist attractions there. Very pleasant day in Belfast, very different to Dublin, but very pleasant nonetheless. Spent 5 minutes in a fairly famous bar, and then the following day we went over to Bangor and visited the Royal Ulster Yacht Club, who were very welcoming. And when we arrived back on the boat, we met Joe, who had delivered unto us a local present, for which we were very grateful. It was another relatively early start this morning, 6 o'clock. In order to catch the tide through Donaghadee Sound, where between Bangor and the Copeland Islands. But very much as predicted, the wind has gone gently into the north, which has meant that we have managed to get the lighter weight spinnaker up and flying, which is nice. And although it was a bit cool and grey this morning, the sun is now beating down, which is nice. And we're doing 3.5, sometimes 4 knots, which is a little bit less than we'd be doing under engine, but this is considerably more melee. We'll see how we get on. Next stop, Ardglass. It's early in the morning again, and we have just left Ireland. So we spent the night in Ardglass, and very, very lovely little place that is. A couple of gentlemen came down to the boat and took us to see their Contessas, which they're busy refurbishing. Really lovely looking job, a real labour of love as well, I think. we're on our way to Wales. Never been to Conway before, so very much looking forward to that. But it's a 80 something mile trip, 82 miles, and Conway's a bit, you can only get in 3 hours either side of high water. High water is midnight, so did the sums. It meant a reasonably early departure. Ideally, if we can make good 5 knots all the way, we'll arrive just inside a little bit of light to get up the river, but that shouldn't be a problem, I hope. And at the moment we are running dead downwind across the Irish Sea, with again the lightweight spinnaker up. So I just pan round. So that is the light blue, therefore the lightweight spinnaker. I need to make sure I don't change course while we're doing this. As usual, Elizabeth in the galley. But we are doing 5 knots, dead downwind. That's the sort of speed we need. That will work very nicely if it stays like this. We put the large head sail on, so the number 1 is on, with a view that we can get rid of the spinnaker and pull out the head sail in order to keep the speed up. But we'll see how it all goes. It was mid-April when we left Kilmore Quay and headed up towards Arklow, I think it was. Yeah, definitely Arklow. And we managed to get the spinnaker up then, and I was quite surprised that we managed to get the spinnaker up going up the Irish Sea, but that was a pleasant surprise. Yesterday, as we came down from Bangor to... Every time I speak, the VHF goes off. Hang on a moment. Yesterday, Bangor to Ardglass, we got the spinnaker up after a very slow start. We had to motor for a little while, and then we left Ardglass this morning and got this kite up, and other than a little gap, it was very breezy for about an hour or so at about 9 o'clock when we took it down, but we've had it up for a couple of hours now, and we are 5.5 knots through the water, 4.5 over the ground because the tide's sort of setting across. We've got the hills of Wales just visible on the starboard bow, and then on the port quarter we have the Isle of Man, and this is very lovely. We were very pleased that we had changed up the headsail to the number 1, because as it got dark the wind went very slightly forward, but we were able to absolutely keep up the speed. The number 1 headsail, which hasn't seen a lot of action this year, or played a blinder, and we had a very spectacularly pleasant looking sunset as we headed in towards Carnarvon. I was a little bit nervous about Carnarvon. It's again tidally constrained, the buoys move around, but we downloaded the lats and longs of the buoys and buoy hopped our way in at about midnight. There wasn't much of a moon, but there was a little bit of starlight. The following day we were in Carnarvon, Conway, and very pleasant indeed, but the wind, although sunshine and blue skies, the wind was fairly strong. We walked over to Deganway as we were crossing the bridge, got a really good little lesson in back eddies here, and that was the lesson from Carnarvon, I guess, both getting in and getting out, and very lovely sunsets, but we did feel a bit locked in by the south easterly, then the southwesterly breeze that kept us there for 3 or 4 days. We were probably going a bit stir crazy, so we escaped Conway as soon as we could, ended up sailing round a little bit of the top of Anglesey, but we returned into the Menai Strait and picked up a buoy at Beaumaris. we always knew that coming south was going to be harder than going north, or in all likelihood because of the prevailing winds, and that is certainly proving to be the case.
And also not being completely familiar with this area.
Yeah, there's that is also adding to the mix. I always wanted to come down through Menai Strait. I haven't done it before. It was on my list of things to do. I've been in boats in this area before, but we've never gone through. We've either gone out through over the Carnarvon Bar and up to Holyhead and then onwards, or gone south. So it was on the list of things to do, and we sort of to a degree boxed ourselves into a corner going to Conway, which was very nice, and had a lovely day visiting places. But we've then had probably for about a week solid southwesterly, a little bit of southeasterly, but southerly southwesterly breezes up in the 4, 5, 6 mark, and occasional. Well, there was
occasional 7.
Occasional 7. So left Conway. We've made our way down to Menai Bridge, and we stayed overnight here on a mooring buoy. But we got lots of good advice. Not all of it completely lined up, but there was lots of people with helpful advice. But Elizabeth and I have just been planning our transit of the Menai Strait, and I just thought I'd take you through what we've done. So the very first thing we did was draw a little picture in our notebook of the area, and that allows you to draw everything out and name everything, so that when they're talking about a particular rock, you know which one it is and where it is. I find that if I just read it, I can't draw the picture. If I draw the picture, then the reading it becomes a lot better. Once we've done that, then taking the pilot book, and we got this one here, and we got this one direct from the author, which was very lovely. He's lent us his while he's up north. Then read the passage through out loud to yourself, checking off all of the points that you've drawn on the picture, and at the same time writing a list of the things that you need to go through. So for example, here we've got midpoint of the Menai Bridge, head for the Swelly Beacon, then aim for the flagpole on the cottage, when your midpoint between Swelly and Price is, etc. So you've got a narrative of what you're going to do that you can line up with the picture that you've drawn. All of that's fine for how you're going to do it. The next thing is the timing, and in this, the timing in the Menai Strait is pretty unusual. Maybe not to anybody who's
familiar with the area,
or indeed familiar with the Solent, but you do have that situation of water entering a constrained area from 2 directions, and what happens is that the area of slack water basically moves from north to south, such that it is slack water between 2 and 2.5 hours between high water Dover. And this is another good reason for sorting it all out in your own head. Some people will talk about Liverpool, some people will talk about local, some people will talk about Dover. They're all right, they're all just slightly different calculations. I've used the tidal streams through the Menai Strait diagram inside Reeds. And that seems to fit in with everything that we're reading. So we've got that. So we've got our pilot book, we've got our own little chart, we've written it all down in our notebook so we know what we're going to do. And then the last thing that we've done, is we've put that as a route into the plotter, so that we can watch as we track through it.
Because I think there's a few hazards as you go through. So the depth may not be the same as it's showing on the chart, and wrecks as well. There's quite a few.
There's a few wrecks, and we've also had a quick look at the local notice to mariners to see if there's anything unusual. But we'll take a little bit of timeline footage as we go through the strait, and you can see it for yourself.
Yeah.
we waited at Menai Bridge, and we could see boats coming through, and you could see them on the tide. But when it looked like it had gone slack, we set off and we headed off for this position. We went right under the middle of the Menai Bridge itself, very much as per the guidance. And as we came through there, we then aimed for the Swellies southerly cardinal mark, making sure we avoided the platters, which is off to port. As we came round, we then started to aim for the flagpole on the island, and as we started to see the bridge emerge, we could see the little transit mark just on the southeast corner. We ran down on that 1231 until we were abeam the pyramid mark here, and then we were able to alter gently to starboard, and at that point we went through the middle of the southeast arch, just shown here, and we just carried on that heading until we were up to Nelson's monument, and by that stage we were through, and then it becomes fairly straightforward following the buoys.
Well, Wales has been quite challenging from a sailing point of view. We're back into big tides, and it looks like a lot of the boats here are bilge keelers. The number of options we have appears to be quite severely limited compared to what we had in Scotland.
Definitely.
But we've got to go south, so onwards and upwards, or in this case, onwards and southwards. Thanks very much for watching.
Thank you.
Goodbye.